Hey Other Siders, this is Sam from Other Side Gaming, and welcome back to Respect Your Elders, episode 7. Anyways, there's a lot of rare games out there, like the 1990s Nintendo World Championship cart, which is almost nigh impossible to find. There are also other games, like the Earthbound prototype for the Nintendo Entertainment System. But I think Nintendo World Championships probably takes over that. But today, we're talking about a game that is almost nigh impossible to find in a physical form. What, you calling me crazy? No, well buddy, take a seat. Ever since the early days of the internet, it seems like gaming companies have wanted to distribute content, digitally. Nowadays, we have this thing called DLC, or downloadable content. Back in the 90s, publishers had to be a little bit more creative with this technology. In December of 1994, Sega released a service known as the Sega Channel. The Sega Channel was a pretty big innovation at the time. Essentially, there was a cartridge that would be stuck into the Genesis, and then from there, a coaxial cord would connect to your cable, allowing you to download various games. Once the game was downloaded into the Genesis, or the RAM of the Genesis, I should say, the game would play just like a normal retail release, but unfortunately, as soon as you turned the Genesis off, you would lose the download. Another thing was that the system wasn't like your video on demand, so to say. If you wanted a certain game, you would have to wait until the game was broadcasted. So the system wasn't perfect, but it was way ahead of its time. The service ran for about $15 a month, and $25 activation fee, but considering you get unlimited access to about 50 games, it's nothing to really cry about. At its peak, Sega Channel was available to about a third of Americans and had a total of 250,000 subscribers. Despite this kind of distribution being almost unheard of, the Sega Channel was quite popular for its run. Our tale now makes its shift over to the land of the rising sun. On November 30th, 1990, a company known as St. Giga started testing broadcast satellite networks to broadcast digital radio through a direct broadcast satellite. St. Giga will be the first satellite digital audio broadcasting corporation. In 1995, after running through a few financial problems, and with an agreement with a little company called Nintendo, St. Giga started to broadcast digitally encoded video games to Super Famicom owners in Japan. However, to apply for the broadcast, Super Famicom owners would have to go out and buy the Satellaview, which is a mashup of words. It's just satellite and view. Clever. Or as an abbreviation, BSX. Yeah, I get it. BS also happens to stand for a few naughty words. Get over it. Once you bought this bad boy for about the price of $150 when you average out the 1995 US exchange rate, you are also required to get a BS tuner, much like how our normal cable boxes work today. The tuner used much of the same technology. It essentially converted raw data from the satellite into something useful like music, or in this case, video games. Since Nintendo didn't produce the tuners, you had to get the tuners straight from St. Giga themselves for about $300. Or you could also rent a tuner for the much more affordable price of $15 a month. Once you had everything you needed, all you had to do was wait until the game was broadcasted. Yes, very much like the Sega Channel, the games only had a certain window of when you could download them. Because St. Giga had radio shows going on through the same satellite, there would only be certain days and times of when you could download the games into an 8MB cartridge. Or if you bought the 16MB cartridge, then you could download the games onto there. But how do you interact with this data? Well, through a BIOS, of course. The BIOS is noted to be called BSX, Sori wa Name Onusumarata Mashi no Monogatari. Sorry for butchering that. The translation being BSX, the story of the town whose name has been stolen. Kind of a lengthy title if you ask me. From the town, you could interact with downloadable games, contests, and even trivia, and all sorts of other things. As far as contests go, people would send in their high scores of games and hope for the best. Some of these prizes are actually, well, they scare me a bit. Moving on. Like I said before, some of these games could be downloaded and stored on extra memory. That means that some of these cartridges still have these games on them. The games can be played through their entirety as they once were originally. This means that these cartridges are very valuable to collectors. Some of their other games that were broadcasted were simple re-releases, like The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, while others were completely overhauled classics of games. And, well, some of them were just plain weird, but nonetheless, the game we're talking about today is an absolute gem. I'll admit, this game isn't for everybody, but if you stick with it, I can guarantee you one of the best gaming experiences you will ever have in your entire life. Now with that, how about we jump into it? Without further ado, I present to you Radical Dreamers on the Super Famicom. Released, or I should say, broadcasted in 1996, Radical Dreamers is sort of a sequel to the famous RPG Chrono Trigger, which I'm sure you've all played. Well, I guess sequel isn't really the correct word to use, so I guess side story works. Oh well. The story starts off with a person looking through their grandfather's journal. Storyception! Once we enter through the story level, we are then introduced to the game's three main characters, Kid, Magil, and Surge, who you control through the game. Going through the dead of night, our three thieves are making their way towards the Viper Mansion to obtain the Frozen Flame, a stone said to have magical powers. And that's all I'm really going to tell you about the story, because, well, if I told you any more, it would ruin the experience. But I'll get to that in a second. Kid is a girl, just making sure here. Kid is Surge's love interest in the game, and Magil is the kid's partner, so to speak. But man, the game really wants you to know that Surge is blinded by love. I mean, seriously, half the gameplay is trying to impress her. God. Woman. By now, you've probably said, hey, where's the gameplay? Well, guess what? You're looking at it. Radical Dreamers is an interactive text-based visual novel. So you can expect a hefty load of reading. Don't let that scare you off though. The writing in this game is extremely well written and keeps you constantly engrossed in the story and main events. Every word fits right in place where it should, and every event builds the mystery of the Viper Mansion. The main interaction of the game is more like a choose-your-own-adventure book. Upon entering the mansion, you're given a split path of which way to go. Yet again, it's all up to you. One path may lead you into a trap, or lead you in the right direction. Normally, if you are about to spring a trap, the game tries to give you little hints to warn you. Like, take this for example. You've taken the party up to a staircase to a wooden door. The characters start to interact with each other, saying that they all have a bad feeling about the room beyond the door. You have a choice. Either ignore the door and go back down the staircase, or take a chance and find an item that you might need to progress. It's all up to you though. But that's not even the worst part. Traps are a pretty big problem for you. But you know what's worse? The enemies. On occasion, you will run into randomly generated enemies while walking through the corridors of the mansion. Except for a few scripted sequences, every enemy is randomly generated each time you play the game. This means that every time you play through, it's going to be a different experience. These encounters can be extremely dangerous. Like choosing your own paths, you also have the option to choose what Search does in combat. You will be given a number of options. Depending on which option you pick, you could be seriously injured or come out without a scratch. Every enemy does have a certain way to kill them easily, and that never changes, so if you manage to figure out how to kill them, they shouldn't give you any more trouble for the rest of the game. If you do manage to get hurt during battle, you can always find places in the mansion that will heal you. However, the enemies can also easily kill you. If you choose too many of the wrong options in a battle, you can wind up dead in your own entrails and have to start at the beginning of the game. And as far as traps go, if you screw up on them, it means instant death. If you do make it out of the encounter, a small conversation between Kid, Magil, and Search will begin, which will tell you your physical condition and how much affection Kid has for you. Kid's affection for you is decided on a few factors. If you can fight well, you choose every option that will impress her, and if you can protect her in a desperate situation. This seems like a really small factor to the game, but really it's one of the biggest. At the end of the game, depending on how high or low your affection meter is, you will have a different ending. Yep, different endings, which highly ups the amount of replay value. Speaking of replay value, once you beat the game, there are a lot of different tangents that the story takes on for a just for fun sort of feeling. I don't know about you, but I love it when game developers do this. It just makes the game a lot more enjoyable, knowing that the developers had a little bit of fun making it as well. Now is the part where I would normally go over the graphics of the game, but there really isn't much to go over. But what really helps out the graphics department is the music. The music in this game is absolutely amazing. This is the part of the game that really shows its ties with Chrono Trigger. Most of the music that you'll find in the game are sort of spin-offs of themes from Chrono Trigger. The music fits the tone of the game perfectly. Whether it's during extremely emotional scenes or a heated battle, the music is never in the way of the experience. If anything, it adds a whole lot more to it. Together with the graphics and music, it makes for a very original experience unlike any other. Yes, at times this game can feel like reading a book, but those moments really tug you into the story to make it worth it all. And even though this is technically a sequel to Chrono Trigger, you don't have to play through Chrono Trigger to follow the story. This game makes a lot more accessible to a larger crowd, but if you did play Chrono Trigger, then you'll definitely appreciate the nods that they made to the original game. Getting your hands on a physical copy of Radical Dreamers is going to be almost next to impossible. However, there are reproduction cartridges out there if you're willing to put out about $60. If you just want to experience the game itself, that's a little easier. The Demi-Force patch is free to download, but it's up to you to find the original ROM yourself. I'm not promoting it, but hey, if you really want to play it, then go ahead. Fun. Overall, I highly recommend playing Radical Dreamers at least once. If you want a breath of fresh air from gaming, this is your game to play. Well, Other Siders, this has been Sam from Other Side Gaming. If you haven't thought about your ancestors lately, think again. See you next time.